Hello everybody, today I'm going to teach you how to compare fractions. Now, here's a quick reminder that the numerator is always the number on top of a fraction and the denominator is the number on the bottom. The bottom number, the denominator, tells us how many pieces the whole has been divided into, and the numerator tells us how many pieces we are talking about. In this scenario, the fraction 3/5 means that the whole has been divided into 5 equal parts, and we are talking about 3 of them. Now let's get to comparing. Now, to compare fractions, this is what you need to do. You need to draw 2 equally sized diagrams or bars, one for every fraction you are comparing. Then you divide each diagram into equal parts. You decide how many parts to divide each diagram by the denominator of the fraction. Hence, for this fraction 2/5, we divide the bar into 5 equal parts because our denominator is 5. And for this bar, we divide it into 4 equal parts because our denominator is 4. After we do that, we shade some of those little boxes we created. We know how many parts to shade by the numerator of the fraction. In this case, we shade 2 of the parts because our numerator is 2. And for the 3/4 bar, we shade 3 of the 4 pieces because our numerator is 3. We do that for both diagrams as we did, and then we compare. The diagram that is shaded more represents the greater fraction. So, if we look at these diagrams, we could see that 3/4 has more shaded than 2/5. And the reason we have to make the diagrams equal sizes is so our whole is the same whole. Because if you are dividing different size, if you are dividing a whole into equal parts, while you're dividing 2 different wholes, the fractions will not be able to be compared because they are from different wholes. You need the fraction to be from the same whole, the same sized whole for you to be able to compare them. That's why we have to make the diagrams the same in length. And so after we make the diagrams, again, we divide each diagram into its respective number of parts. For 2/5, we divide it into 5 parts, and for 3/4, we divide it into 4 parts. Then we shade each bar its own amount of times. We shade each part, and to know how many parts we have to shade, we look at the numerator. In this case, the numerator is 2, which means you have to shade 2 parts. And in 3/4, the numerator is 3, which means you have to shade 3 parts. And then we look at the diagrams, we see that 3/4 has more shaded, which means that 3/4 is greater than 2/5. Or you could write that 2/5 is less than 3/4. Either way is correct. Now let's do some practice problems. Here's our first problem, 2/3 and 4/5. We need to compare those. Now let's draw 2 bars of equal length. And let's make this bar stand for 4/5 and this bar stand for 2/3. Now, since the denominator is 5, we have to divide this bar into 5 equal parts. There we go. We divided this bar into 5 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for this one, since the denominator is 3, we divide the bar into 3 equal parts. Now we have to shade. Now to shade, I will switch the color of the shading so it is easier to understand. So for 4/5, we will shade 4 parts from the 5 parts we created, because our numerator is 4. And for 2/3, we have to shade 2 out of our 3 parts, because our numerator is 2. Now, if you carefully look at these 2 bars, you can notice that 4/5 has more shading than 2/3. 2/3 shading ends here, while 4/5 shading ends here. That means that 4/5 is greater than 2/3. Now, let's do another example. Let's do 3/7 and 5/6. Let's draw our 2 bars, one for each fraction, and we should make them of equal length so we could compare them correctly. Let this one stand for 3/7, and let this one stand for 5/6. Now, let's divide them into the parts that we should. So 3/7, the denominator is 7, which means we have to divide the bar into 7 equal parts. Now let's do that. Here we have 7 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And let's do that for the next fraction, whose denominator is 6, which means we have to divide the bar into 6 equal parts. Let's divide that. And now we have 6 equal parts. Now, let's compare them. We have 3/7 and 5/6. For 3/7, we need to shade 3 of the 7s because our numerator is 3. And for the 5/6, we have to shade 5 of the 6s because our numerator is 5. Let's switch the color and shade 1, 2, 3 boxes for 3/7, and shade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes for the 5/6. Now this one's difference is clear. You have 3/7 that ends here and 5/6 that ends here. It is clearly shown that 5/6 is greater than 3/7. Therefore, 5/6 is greater than 3/7. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. Goodbye.